Mark Gray of Spacecraft Films denies this footage exists. Is he lying?
You know, Jarrah, I can't help but wonder how many countless hours you must have spent combing through all the literature you could find in order to find a couple of examples of two people who disagreed on something related to Apollo. If they really did disagree, then it means one of them is wrong on this particular point. Now, since I've never quoted either of them, or been in contact with either of them, or based any of my opinions on anything that either of them has ever said, then I guess these two questions really aren't intended for me.
Unlike you, I have no need to quote mine. As with any rocket launch, the site had been wired with cameras. The day after the fire, the New York Times reported that the accident had been recorded by the pad cameras and seen on many television monitors.
Fires on spacecraft captured on film by Martin Waldron, special to the New York Times. Houston, January 27th. The flash fire that killed 3 astronauts in a spacecraft at Cape Kennedy tonight was filmed, an official of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration said today. However, the film and recordings made of the astronauts' voices, which were being monitored at Cape Kennedy and at Houston during the test, were sealed immediately after the accident. Paul P. Haney, Director of Public Affairs for the Manned Spacecraft Center here, said the film and recordings would be turned over to a board of inquiry of finding out exactly what happened.
Thomas Ronald Barron testified the astronauts smelled either fire or smoke at around 6:20 p.m. and tried for 5 minutes to get out. It seems that Gary Probst confirms this. On January 31, 1967, he told the review board,
"About 15 seconds after the cry of fire, I saw more arms in addition to White's in front of the porthole seemingly coming from the left. Looking further back into the spacecraft, I could see the legs of the center astronaut moving about. The movement inside the spacecraft lasted about 2 minutes before the flames began to block the view. During the entire time that I watched the astronauts moving, their spacesuits were silver in color with no signs of being burned or charred. I know that my times are very near accurate, because I remember saying to the others that had gathered in the area of the monitor, 'Blow the hatch! Why don't they blow the hatch?' One person that was near said the spacesuits would protect them from the heat until they could get out. A short conversation then took place concerning how long and how much the suits could protect them from the fire. Also, comment was made on why no one had entered the White Room as yet. During the time of this conversation, the White Room was still clear, and the astronauts' motion still visible."
Gary Probst stood by what he told the review board. A year later, Probst told the newspaper Today,
"I think NASA convinced themselves of what happened in the spacecraft, but they didn't convince me. It was about 3 minutes after the fire started that the White Room began to fill with smoke. Prior to that time, the air was clear. I saw the astronauts moving inside for at least 2 minutes before the flames began to block the view."
If NASA wanted to set aside the issue once and for all they would have to do is release those tapes. After all, on the evening of the fire, Paul P. Haney confirmed that NASA had videotape of the fire. So where is this video footage which undoubtedly shows Edward White's final struggle? In August 2007, in the aforementioned online forum, buyers of the Spacecraft Films DVD wrote in to ask if there was video footage of the disaster. One of these customers pointed out that in the documentary Moonshot, a 3-second clip of a window engulfed in flames was used. Another member pointed out that the same documentary showed a few seconds of the gantry by night, showing smoke and fire billowing from the top. Mark Gray promptly stamped on these, stating,
There is no videotape or film taken during the fire on January 27th. Any window engulfed in flames you saw in Moonshot was either staged or was from the boilerplate test. Once again, there is no footage of the spacecraft during the fire. I've had this conversation with many people saying they saw it here or saw it there. There is no footage of the spacecraft during the fire.
This is in direct contradiction to what NASA stated the day after the fire. Videotape of the disaster exists, and as Gary Probst testified, it showed the astronauts trying to get out for 3 minutes. Perhaps this is why Mark Gray denies this footage exists. By actively suppressing that footage, he is protecting the official government lie that NASA sold to the world. As was evident from his Apollo 10 DVD set, the complete Apollo record will be whatever Mark Gray says is complete. Gene Cernan claims his lunar module produced a loud engine noise. Is this logical? Alan Bean, Buzz Aldrin, and Rusty Schweickart all claim the engines on their respective lunar modules were silent. Is that true?
Since by now it should be clear to just about anyone who's been watching this series, your tendency to quote mine, take people out of context, second guess, misrepresent, I'm not going to look this up. I'm not even going to try to answer it. You show the complete quotes, then maybe I will.
Unlike you, I have no need to quote mine. In an audio interview, which can be found on the Spacecraft Films DVD, Schweickart claims his lunar module's engine was silent.
We had a number of surprises. In the lunar module, you had the two engines, the descent engine down at the bottom, and then the ascent engine that was buried right in the middle of it at the bottom of the ascent stage. But all you had to do was reach around behind you and you could lay your hand on the top of that engine bell. I mean, it had a can over it, but there's that rocket engine is literally sitting right there. You just reach around and there it is. And so Jim and I, when we lit off when we knew we were going to be lighting off the ascent engine to test that during the rendezvous, we figured, we're not going to be able to hear each other. So if anything is going wrong, we worked out a whole bunch of hand signals, that would allow us to communicate in case something went wrong during that ascent engine burn. So we count down 3, 2, 1, ignition, light off the ascent engine, and there's no noise. No noise at all. Jim, what's going on? Anything wrong? No, nothing's wrong. We're looking at we had to look at the instrument to see that the acceleration was up, so we knew the engine was working, but it didn't make any noise at all. So that was a great, pleasant surprise. I mean, that there wasn't any acoustic coupling there. The engine shut off and just kept going. But it was, it was pleasant surprises like that.
This is an agreement to the claims made by Buzz Aldrin and Alan Bean, but conflicts with the claims made by Gene Cernan. On page 317 of his book, The Last Man on the Moon, Gene Cernan wrote this about his alleged descent to the moon aboard a lunar module Challenger. The rocket engine continued its booming growl, and the constant vibrations felt like big wheels were churning beneath my feet. This is not what Buzz Aldrin reported during his alleged liftoff from the moon on Apollo 11.
5, put a pitch over. Very smooth. Balance couple off. Very quiet ride. There's that one crater on there.
And here is Apollo 12 LEM pilot Alan Bean, telling us the exact same thing during his alleged descent to the moon aboard a lunar module Intrepid.
The The rocket engine that we used to descend to the moon was a very simple rocket engine. It operated at low pressure, so that it was like running your car at 30 miles an hour, not running your car like a race car. The engines we used to launch from Earth was like running your car at race car speeds, you know, so everything had to be just right. But we were interested in safety paramount right there. We didn't have last minute checks we could do. We only had one engine, it couldn't fail, so it ran at lower pressure. And when you were in it, you couldn't hear it in the vacuum of space.
As we saw earlier, Schweikart said the exact same thing about Spider, that his engine was also silent. It's either loud or quiet. Which is it? Does this mean Apollo 9 was also faked? Or is Schweikart just trying to cover for Buzz and Mr. Bean? Or is the engine supposed to be silent and Cernan goofed during his testimony? I honestly don't know. This conflict has made me very uncertain about whether or not Apollo 9 was real.